Okay, we'll start with this. Per a tweet from Michael Benson, Eddie Hearn has stated that Conor Benn's next fight will be a pay-per-view and described the 4 possible opponents. One is a huge name and one of the greatest fighters of our generation,
Manny Pacquiao.
Another is a massive stadium fight. Another could be for the welterweight world title.
That could be Mario Barrios. That could be a Montestanianis. Neither one of those two guys have much going on.
And the other is a former 2-division world champion. Conor's gonna be in a massive fight next.
Got to be talking about Danny Garcia. He's a 2-division champion, or he was, at 140, then 147.
Start from the top. Do I want to see Conor Benn box today's version of Manny Pacquiao?
No.
Hasn't really retired, has he? He's just been hanging around, throwing his name into the mix. I heard he tried to qualify for the next Olympics, but he was rejected.
Retire.
Stay retired. Manny Pacquiao probably can't. As good as he was in the ring, outside of the ring, he never had much business acumen. And for as many big fights as he was in, you have to wonder how much of that money is left. That he's still hanging around and still offering to do fights and be in fights.
His political career is over.
I don't want to see Conor Benn box today's version of Manny Pacquiao. How long has it been since he fought? He's coming off that loss to Ugas. What was that? 2 years ago?
Fuck that fight.
Eddie also said that Conor Benn could box for a world title in his very next fight. That could be 2 possible names, 2 possible options, I think. One could be Mario Barrios for the WBC. The other could be a Montestanianis for the WBA.
But they're not champions.
They could be, very soon. Once Terence Crawford vacates the remaining titles that he has, a Montestanianis could be elevated to full WBA champion. Mario Barrios could be elevated to full WBC champion. And compared to Manny, those are cheaper alternatives, perhaps even more viable since the PBC ain't got much use for them. You have to remember, those 2 guys, those 2 names, they normally box under the PBC banner, but the PBC, they ain't got enough fight dates for these guys, so maybe some of them go to Matchroom, maybe one of them. Opposite the ring, Conor Benn.
Do you like those fights?
I do. I like either an a Montestanianis fight or a Mario Barrios fight more than a Pacquiao fight. I don't want to see Manny Pacquiao out there at his age.
Stanionis has been out a while.
Stanionis hasn't boxed since Spence beat Ugas. Remember that he fought Radzov Butaev on the undercard? Not last year, the year before that. It's been roughly 2 years since a Montestanianis fought, so now would be the right time for Conroy to fight that guy.
It's a good fight.
If a Montestanianis has been inactive, if he hasn't been busy, he has his own handlers to blame for that. I understand that he lost some time on the Virgil Ortiz fight, but even Virgil has returned to action, so it seems to me that a Montestanianis' handlers aren't working hard enough for him, and that leaves him open to be taken advantage of. Something similar applies to Mario Barrios, another PBC guy. He hasn't fought since he fought former champion Yordenis Ugas. I think if he were to fight Conor the night of, it would have been a year's time since he last saw action, whereas Conor's fought in the last 12 months 2 times.
Aesthetically, Conor Benn being an action guy, and those 2 guys being action guys, Conor versus any one of them makes for a fun fight.
Who's the 2-division champion?
Danny Garcia.
Danny Garcia, for some time now, his name was attached to a potential Lara fight at a catch weight of 155 for Lara's WBA title, but the fight never materialized. I can only deduce that the kind of money that Danny was looking for, maybe they just didn't have it, and that's what took so long. So now Lara's fighting his mandatory challenger, Michael Zarafa, on the undercard of Zoo versus Thurman, and
Danny said he's willing to fight Conor. He even said he's willing to go to the UK to do it.
He should, because his name ain't worth a damn around here. He's never been all that big a draw, you understand me? And he never really wanted to assume the role of a gatekeeper, but that's what he is. And if he has to travel for his money, then so be it.
Fuck him.
You hear Eddie Hearn say that Conor Benn's next fight is going to be a pay-per-view. That gives me the impression his next fight won't be in America like his last 2 fights were. That behind the scenes, the wheels are in motion to get Conor Benn back on UK soil, where he's worth a nice chunk of change.
That's one possibility.
Saudi Arabia is another. Good number of Matchroom fighters are set to make their next ring appearances in Saudi, so that's another possibility. If you were able to get him a boxing license in America, then you can get him a boxing license in Saudi for big money, big cash that can attract big names.
Big bitch.
It seems like what was supposed to be the Chris Eubank Jr. fight has lost all momentum, all steam. Chris is looking at either Kell Brook or Yanibek Alimkhanalai. Conroy is not on his radar. Not anymore, and it just is what it is. The saving grace for young Conroy is he has a good number of options. We just talked about a few of them.
And he's young.
He's got a lot of fucking tattoos and he speaks 2 languages, this kid. He's marketable.
Hable español.
Muchas gracias, por favor.
Kind of been. I like this fucking kid. Though a lot has been made about his knockout power, or the lack thereof, that the last 2 guys, he didn't look too strong with those 2 guys, but need I remind you that those 2 guys that he fought, that was up there at junior middleweight, whereas Conor, before that, he was boxing as a welterweight.
Perhaps when he goes back down to welterweight, you'll see the power come back.
Though it doesn't help that he had that whole anti-doping fiasco and tested positive for some banned substance, and some people still hold that against him. In truth, I'm not that altruistic, and I don't pretend to be. Because if I were, there are any number of fighters that I would have to stop watching on principle. I'd have to miss out on Fury versus Usyk, or Canelo versus anybody.
And I don't care that much.
Conor is back, and it is what it is.
For the fight, and I like Samson a lot, and Samson says, "Oh, we'll fight him for free," we'll, all this kind of general stuff. I said, "Look, if Canelo works with us, we'll make the fight with Benavidez." And he went, "Yes, no problem, just give us the US TV on Amazon." I'm like, "What?"
It's a non-starter. Simpson Lewkowicz knows that. You think that Matchroom's going to pay Canelo and pay David, bankroll the show, so that they can then hand over the rights to it to Al Heyman and his PBC.
Are you stupid?
Well, he's not stupid, which is why you have to question whether or not they ever had any real intention of making this fight. And we'll get to that.
No, mate. If Canelo comes with us on DAZN, and DAZN are putting up the money for Munguia and Belanga and all these people, DAZN are going to put up the money for Benavidez.
So tell me again how it makes sense to ask for the broadcast rights.
If you're trying to do this fight.
It doesn't make sense. The only way that makes sense is if you're not trying to do this fight. If you're trying to sabotage it. If you plan on playing on the ignorance of the boxing community at large, using this angle to sell David Benavidez, sell his fights in the absence of what was supposed to be the bottom line, the Canelo fight.
What? Mate, you're a challenger. Do you want to fight the king? Or you just only if it works with your promoter?
The more that comes out about the deal they struck last year, the 3-fight deal, and everything that's going on right now, the more I begin to question whether David Benavidez and Samson ever actually wanted this fight. Because when Al Heyman wrote up the 3-fight deal last year, he didn't include David Benavidez.
There's no version of the story where David was part of the deal.
I had one guy ask me, why didn't Canelo demand it? Because Canelo's the one that needs to do the demanding.
What fucking planet do you guys live on?
Heyman didn't actually make David part of the 3-fight deal.
That's interesting.
David and his team, they never actually put much pressure on the WBC to order it. They never put much pressure on the WBC to enforce the mandatory, the kind of pressure you saw Dillian White put on them, threatening the WBC with legal action if he didn't get his title shot. I never saw that same energy from David or Samson.
I don't think it would have worked.
The WBC won't prioritize David over Canelo. I've said that many times, but still, you still expect to see the outrage. You still expect to see the effort. And I didn't see it from Team Benavidez.
I'm not talking about doing a bunch of fucking interviews where you're talking shit.
Anybody can do interviews and talk a bunch of fucking shit. Behind the scenes, where you filing paperwork, where you calling your lawyers, where you squeezing the WBC, putting pressure on them. What were you actually doing?
Besides interviews.
So Heyman didn't make David part of the deal. David and his team never really pressured the WBC.
Canelo leaves Al Heyman, goes to Matchroom. First thing Eddie does is get Samson on the phone.
Wants to do the fight, and Samson starts talking about getting the broadcast rights.
He knows better than I do, better than you do, that that's a non-starter. Why would Matchroom bankroll the show to give the rights to the fight to you?
If you put up the money to do the show, it's because you plan on making money from the show. You put in so you can get something back. You don't put in so you can give the show away to somebody else.
The fuck?
Had one guy tell me that they were right to ask for the rights to the fight, and they were quote-unquote negotiating.
That's not negotiating. That's sabotaging the fight.
That's what the conversation devolves into whenever Al Heyman and one of his PBC fighters are involved. Everything that we know and understand about the sport is supposed to bend, budge, and twist to the will of Al Heyman, at least in their minds.
Got former Glendale Gacho. Given the recent news, Canelo leaving PBC, would you consider a buyout of your PBC contract to cross the street for the Saul fight?
Fuck no.
This from the same guy that says he wants to fight Canelo Alvarez, that he'd fight him for peanuts on the dollar.
Wants to stay loyal to the PBC, that's what he said.
But Matchroom isn't trying to tie him down. They're not trying to lock him in to a multi-fight deal. If he wants it to be a one-and-done kind of situation, it can be. That's what Eddie Hearn said 2 or 3 days ago.
If I reached out to Benavidez, what the PBC do is they go, we're only making that fight on the PBC. We'll give Benavidez the opportunity. And this is what people don't understand. They're not willing to let their guys go on another platform to take a chance to achieve greatness. It all has to happen with them only.
Why do you think that? So how does Matchroom
Because that's just how it
capitalize on
operates.
what's going on with the PBC?
So what we do is we sign who we want to sign, the people who have the commercial value, not just guys because they've got a good name. Some of these guys, PBC have lost a lot of money on doing fights with those fighters.
Okay.
So you have to, the price has to be right, the business has to be right. But people like Benavidez, if we do manage to do a deal with Canelo Alvarez, we can do Munguia, we can do Berlanga, or if Benavidez wants to come and play, but when PBC do a deal, they only let you go and fight one of their fighters if you align yourself to PBC. What I wouldn't do to Benavidez is say, oh, you can fight Canelo Alvarez, but you've got to sign a 5-fight deal with Matchroom or DAZN. I just want to see a great fight.
Do you understand? Do you hear that? That if David wants to stay with Samson and stay with Al after the Canelo Alvarez fight, he can. No one's asking him to walk into a long-term arrangement with Matchroom or DAZN to get the Canelo fight.
Moreover, what are you actually getting from staying over there?
He's on his way up to 175 pounds to try and become WBC interim champion, but the actual champions at the weight, they're with other promoters. They're on other sides of the street. So you're essentially walking into the same situation for less money.
It's the same at 175 as it is at 168. The PBC ain't got no champions up there for you to fight.
You guys, people kept criticizing me saying that I only want a payday, this and that. I've been making good money, bro, for fucking like 7 years. Really good money. PBC and Al Heyman have taken care of me. So why would I go across the street when I've been getting treated really good with PBC and Al Heyman? Why would I go across the street when they probably only want to give me a 1-fight deal?
What I wouldn't do to Benavidez is say, oh, you can fight Canelo Alvarez, but you've got to sign a 5-fight deal with Matchroom or DAZN. I just want to see a great fight.
Matchroom is more than willing to make this a one-and-done kind of situation, but David Benavidez says, I'm not going to be waiting on Canelo.
So once again, I'm starting to wonder, is it a fight that he wanted or a marketing angle?
We've seen this before. We saw this with Wilder and Joshua. Joshua was the clear A side, Wilder was the clear B side.
Look at how he played it.
Benavidez says that his actions speak a lot of words. This was the biggest fight, so him parting ways with the PBC, even though this fight for me and him was on the table, it just speaks volumes.
According to Eddie Reynoso, it was never offered.
And the only report out there that indicates that David's name may have come up indicates that it didn't come up until after Al went back on the deal. How do you expect to keep doing business with Canelo Alvarez
when you're going back on the deal just one fight in?
But David continued, I'm not going to be waiting on Canelo. After I fight Canelo, my career doesn't end. It's frustrating, but it just gives me a bad name at the end of the day, too. The reason why this fight is not happening is because Canelo doesn't want it to happen. Plain and simple.
The blame game.
How many times has the PBC expected us to fall for that? I mean, the money is there, the anticipation from the fight fans is there, said Benavidez. It would be an amazing event. I don't need Canelo.
Like Wilder didn't need Joshua, right?
I mean, the only reason people fight Canelo is for a payday. I don't care about money. I care about winning titles and giving the fans the best fights possible, and yet you've been at this weight much, much longer than Canelo, and you got less titles than Canelo. You didn't unify.
You were here through 2 cycles of champions and you didn't unify. That's how much you care about titles, huh?
The thing I cared about was the opportunity, because I know once I beat him, then that's when the money comes, and yet the opportunity is still there. The opportunity is right there for you, and it's a one-and-done opportunity. You ain't got to make a commitment to Matchroom. You ain't got to become a DAZN fighter. If you really want it.
He doesn't want it.
He says he doesn't care about money. He only cares about the opportunity. At the same time, his promoter is making it about the broadcast rights.
So which one is it?
What, you don't care about the money, but you care about the broadcast rights? At least your promoter does. Make it make sense.
You don't care about the money, but you care about the platform?
The thing I cared about was the opportunity, because I know once I beat him, that's when the money comes, said Benavidez. These are the sacrifices you have to take. PBC and Al Heyman have been paying me really good for a really long time, so I'm happy with them, and you can still stay with them, win or lose. Once again, no commitment, no strings attached. You go over there, you do the job, you don't do the job, you can go back.
I don't think he wanted this fight.
Then what's going on?
I don't think he can make 168 anymore.
Not safely. I mean, there's a lot here that you have to digest, that Al Heyman never actually made him part of the original deal, that him and his team, they never really pressured the WBC to order the fight. They didn't legal up or anything like that.
They didn't lawyer up. They didn't take legal action. They didn't do nothing. Nothing but interviews.
The opportunity to do it, it's still there. You just have to cross the street. That's it. Is that too much to ask? So the way it looks, when the PBC fighter is the A-side fighter, the fighter has to come to them. But even when the PBC fighter isn't the A-side fighter, the fighter still has to come to them.
Even when the fighter is Canelo.
Quite literally, the top earning boxer in the sport, the biggest draw in this country, the biggest draw in America, even he is supposed to bend, budge, twist, and fold for Al Heyman and his B and C side fighters.
Wow.
David won't cross over to DAZN for him, but what's going to happen if he actually wins? What's going to happen if he actually becomes WBC interim champion and mandatory to the winner of Better Beef versus B-Vault? Because none of those fighters are PBC fighters. None of those fighters are on your side of the street, so you're going to end up in the same situation for less money. And when you do,
What are you going to do?
your mandatory status, should you obtain it, doesn't give you any more leverage over the winner of that fight than you just had over Canelo Alvarez. It's really the same situation. If you were to push for the mandatory and you weren't able to reach a deal with the winner of that fight, whoever it is, Artur, Dimitri, whatever,
A purse bid will ensue.
and then it'll become about winning the purse bid in order to win the rights. And even if your people have the money to win the rights, don't forget that most of that money, it's going to go to the champion. It's not going to go to David.
David's just a challenger. He's only entitled to 25%. You think they want that?
Fuck wanting it. Do you think they have it?
No.
So I don't know what fucking game David and his people are playing. I just see another PBC fighter that's shooting himself in the foot. Because if he's doing anything, he's doing that.
I've read this book before.
The most that I can say is some of these guys are fucking brainwashed. It is what it is.